talk about something very interesting here. Now, you'll notice that each of these pieces of the eye coincide with fractions, and the largest fraction here is actually smell, 1/2. 1/2 is bigger than 1/4. 1/4 is smaller. 1/8 is even smaller. 1/16 is even smaller. So the largest fraction here is a half, right? Why would they make smell a half? And it's not that they necessarily made smell a half. It's the things that they understood that in today's times that we forgot, that they understood that smell is the most powerful scent that we have. Now, let's talk about why smell being at 1/2 is the most powerful scent that we have, that the science that the Egyptians understood that we no longer understand today. Okay. So ancient Egyptians, they were very aware of the power of scent. Okay. It was believed that every human produces an odor. They produces their own individual odors. It was believed that your odor was connected with your soul. The things that you eat, the things that you think about, emotions. They believed that you can smell scents, and humans reacted upon the scents that they smelled, and they understood things on a deeper level, right? Also in ancient Egypt, perfume making was a sacred business, okay? So you had to be a priest to make perfumes and make incenses. And when they had rituals, they would use certain smells in order to evoke certain memories. So they would coincide a smell for a particular ritual, so that every time you smelled that smell, you would remember the meaning of the ritual, the meaning of whatever was going on. And we can see this practice today when, we have anointing. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the concept of anointing and why incenses are closely related to a lot of spiritual practices and meditation and stuff like that, right? So they believe that Osiris was the god of plants, right? They believe Osiris, which is Horus's father, was the god of the physical plant body, and they had another god, Nefertum, who was the god of oils and scents, right? So they believe that oils were the spirit of something, because the smell comes from the oils. When you take an oil, the essence of something is considered its spirit, and that's where we get essential oils from, right? Because they have the spiritual oils. The spirit of the plant is now contained in this essence, which is the pure form of the plant, right? So it's another connection here. And they also believe that good smells coincided with their god of order, who was Ma'at. Ma'at was the god of order, and the god of chaos represented bad smells. Okay, so a lot of times back in those days, they didn't have pharmaceutical companies. What they had were the plants. They had to go out and really study the plants and understand how to live one with the nature in order to, keep their bodies healthy. And a way that they were able to navigate the jungles and the vast forests was through the use of their noses. Okay, they relied heavily on their noses, and they also thought of smelling as the same as the thought of breathing. So the nose was associated with keeping a person alive. Okay. So that is some of the things that the Egyptians believed about the nose and smelling. But let's look at science today and see what science today says about it. Whether they were right or whether they were wrong. Okay. Let's see what we know today. I'm going to go ahead and erase this out of course here. Okay, I tend to draw with a lean. All right, so this is some of the things that we know today in science, and I encourage you guys to look all of this stuff up so you don't just take it from me, right? All right, so neurology has proven that 75% of our daily emotions are controlled by smell. That's a high percentage. So however you feel whenever you're walking around throughout the day, has been proven that it's controlled by your smell. Now, why is this controlled by the smell? Because unlike other senses, right? Other senses, your touch, your sight, your hearing, your taste, they all have to be routed through what's called the thalamus in the brain. So it goes through your thalamus first before you become consciously aware that you're touching something, that you're listening to something. It routes through your thalamus, and then you become conscious of it, right? Your smell, however, bypasses the thalamus and goes straight to your amygdala, which controls your emotions, and the hippocampus, which controls your memory. So the smell is the only scent that bypasses the brain and goes directly to these centers. And also in ancient Egypt, it was believed that the heart was the center of intelligence and not the mind. So it's thought that the smell bypasses the mind and goes directly to the heart, where the emotions are seated in the amygdala. Let's talk about meditation here for a second. Okay. In meditation, smell helps unlock doors to the unconscious when you're meditating, right? We meditate. The point of meditation, I'll say the point of meditation today has been lost. People do it, but they don't really understand what they're doing, right? So whenever you're told to meditate, it's been proven that meditation can help you regulate certain emotions. It can also bring you to a calmer state of mind, right? Give you clarity, help you remember things, right? The point of meditation is when you meditate, you're told to close your eyes, right? That's your sight. Quiet your mind, right? That's your thought. Don't have any distractions in your hand. That's your touch, right? It's good to meditate in a fasting state, right? So you're not eating anything. That's your taste, right? Eyes, mind, hearing. Make sure you're in a quiet environment when you meditate, right? That's your ears, right? And the only point of meditation is what? I think we all have heard of this. Breathe deeply. In through the nose, out through the mouth. So in ancient Egypt, they understood that breathing deeply was heavily associated with smell. The point of meditation is to turn all senses off, turn off the brain, and only go through the route of the smell, which bypasses the mind, right? So a lot of people don't really understand that science today, but this is something that ancient Egyptians heavily understood, that the science of meditation was really to really boost your power of smell, which also boosts your intuition. This is why animals are able to have intuitive insight to things that are going on, miles away, because they're very in tune with other cues that we aren't aware of. Okay. Also, The National Institute of Health.com states that emotions have smells, and humans emit specific chemical signals called chemosignals through your sweat and your tears. And based upon your emotional state, like fear, stress, happiness, people are reacting to it subconsciously. So if you are feeling a certain way, if you're mad, if you're whatever, and you're sweating, like sometimes anxiousness makes you sweat and stuff, people can pick up on that subconsciously and they begin to react to those same chemical cues that you're giving off. Additionally, researchers have found that the tears of women let out a secretion, a chemosignal, that actively reduces aggression in other people. So women's tears make people more calm. This has been scientifically proven, and I encourage you all to look this information up, so you can see it for yourself. Okay. Now let's talk about this concept of anointing. Okay. A lot of religions talk about anointing, right? Today, anointing is often talked about like a spiritual practice, like, oh, that person is anointed because he's wise or he's righteous or something, right? But anointing was actually a physical practice. It was a practice of smearing aromatic oil or perfume on a person or object to sanctify them or set them apart, to show their authority and also show that they're covered by a divine spirit. So the practice of anointing is a physical aspect where you're rubbing oil on something. That's why even today, we'll see people using olive oil, right? But in the Bible, the real purpose of anointing was to have other people aware. How do you know when a person is anointed? Back then, they knew a person was anointed because they had access to the priestly perfumes, because remember, perfuming was a sacred business. They could smell it on a person. Oh, you're righteous, you're of a holy caliber. Whereas maybe the fisherman was not really seen as high up in that hierarchy of time back then. So the Bible actually gives you a recipe for anointing, all right? The recipe is olive oil, myrrh, cinnamon and cassia, and fragrant cane. So it has cinnamon, myrrh. These are all tree resins that have a thick smell, but today generally a lot of people just tend to use olive oil, but they're missing the actual fragrant smells that are supposed to, when you wear anointing, it's supposed to remind you in certain situations that when you smell it, smells are heavily connected to emotions and memory. They tie back to your emotions and memory, right? And we're going to talk about the Proust effect, where you can smell an emotion and be transported back to a certain place. But when you smell something, it's also been scientifically proven that you can smell something and study, and if you smell that same thing right before you take the test, you'll have a higher percentage of memory recall than what you would if you don't have essential oils and stuff that you smell. So the anointing was also for the user to remind them that they are supposed to be holding themselves to a higher standard. Now let's talk about what's known as the Proust effect, okay? This guy named Proust, he wrote a book, and it's like a famous passage where he talks about eating a piece of cake and he dips it in his tea, and right before he puts it in his mouth, he has a smell that in the book transports him back to a time where he remembers or whatnot, okay? But researchers found that this effect is actually real. The Proust effect creates a sudden and overwhelming sensation of being transported back in time, okay? The time traveling sensation is the scent triggered memories are involuntary and make you feel like you've been physically transported back to the exact moment that smell triggered, right? And sometimes when people report that they're having a Proust effect, like you'll smell something and you'll begin to cry. Like it evokes an immediate emotional response where you're not even aware of why it's happening. But because it passes your mind, you're not aware. It goes straight to your emotional sensors and triggers a scent trigger that when you smell something, you might think of a childhood memory. You smell something, you might think of your grandma. Oh, she used to smell like this. Or you smell another person, a male or a woman that you might be interested in, and you don't realize that some kind of odor that they're giving off is the same odor that your parents had, or that your brothers had that you're familiar with that brings back up certain memories. Okay, and now let's talk about how doctors use scent to treat memory loss. Okay, so scent therapies have been used to physically rebuild neural pathways. Through scent therapy, think about how powerful that is. That the scent is rebuilding structures in your mind where you can drink and you can kill the structures in your mind. You're killing your brain cells when you drink alcohol and do things like that. But doctors have used scent therapies to rebuild structures in the mind. They exposed older adults to concentrated essential oils for 2 hours before they or while they sleep with a essential oil diffuser, and the study showed that the seniors were able to have a memory recall of 226% greater than before they were on the study. This is over a course of 6 months where they did these scent treatments, and they used rose oil, they used orange, they used eucalyptus, lemon, peppermint, rosemary, and lavender, right? And after 6 months, the senior citizens were able to have a memory recall of 226% greater than what they had before, right? They did brain scans, and the brain scans confirmed that there was a physical thickening in the brain's pathways, that the scent treatments that they were conducting every night were literally rebuilding the mind. So you can actually do this for yourself. Get you some essential oils and have a diffuser before you go to bed at night, and you will be actively repairing pathways in your mind while you're sleeping. They also did another study where patients sniffed 4 or 5 distinct high concentration essential oils twice a day while actively focusing on a specific memory. Okay, and the targeted exercise stimulated neuroplasticity, which increased the gray matter volume in their hippocampus, right? So again, it's showing that the smell is actually producing a physical effect in the brain. And this is the stuff that I don't know how much of it specifically that the ancient Egyptians understood, but somehow they intuitively knew that the smell was a very important function of the human body. All right. So that's enough on the nose and how important the smell is here.